What's up everybody, Dane Jackson here, and in this video I can finally make a video that I've wanted to make for a while, and that is basically the secrets of the sub 4. In this video I'm going to be going through all the lines that I've learned over the years and really just all the things I dialed in while trying to go for sub 4 and training for it, and all those little things I learned on how to save time in order to have the best lines possible. In this video I'm going to break it down and go through it, whether it's the fastest lines that I've found or simply just when it comes to paddling a longboat on the green, the most consistent lines I've been able to find. So let's get into it, let's break it down, and I'm looking forward to sharing all this information with you guys. So with the sub 4, it's obviously been talked about for a long time, and it wasn't necessarily my first goal. The first goal I had was I wanted to win the green race, but it took a while for me to actually get my first win at the green race because there was always somebody that was faster, or I would crash and not have the best lines. And then in 2018, once I finally got my first win, I was like, okay, now it's time to really break this down and get into it and figure out what it's going to take to get sub 4. The first thing I did, which I thought was going to be almost enough, was I downloaded all my past race runs, as well as, Pat Keller's race runs, Eric DeGiel. And the first thing I did was I broke the race course down into 3 sections. The first section from the race start to the little hole above where you can choose a line at Boofers Consequence. And then from there to the little wave after Chiefs, and then from there to the finish. And I was like, if I could just see which runs are fastest in those sections, I should have a really good sense of what it's going to take. But then after I timed all those race runs and found out where the fastest times were in all those sections, I thought by combining the fastest 3 together, I was going to get like a 3:52, because it was going to be basically the most perfect run you could imagine. But then once I combined the fastest times from those 3 sections from previous race runs, it was only like a 3:59, and to me that was like, okay, that's not a good sign, because in the end, by combining those 3, it should have been like the most perfect run. But it only being a 3:59, I was like, okay, clearly it's not going to just be some paddling hard run. There's going to be a lot of other things that need to happen in order to make up that time to get under sub 4. Once I realized that, I went ahead and broke down basically the entire course, top to bottom, almost every little move you could think of. I timed my race runs as well as practice runs, and really started to notice a lot of little places you can save a lot of time, because it all really adds up. And what took me by surprise is that it's very easy to be like, oh, I had a smooth run top to bottom, that's about as good as it'll go, I just need to paddle a little harder. I started to notice there's a lot of places by putting in that little extra effort from good to great, it ended up saving a lot of time down a lot of those moves. And there were a lot of places saving time that I wasn't expecting. So I broke down the entire course, and it got to the point that I knew almost every quarter and half a second that I could save. Even to the point I figured out how to save half a second from entering the notch to your bow touching the pad at Gorilla. So in the end, that breakdown was really what helped me really figure out not only where I can be most consistent and where it was most important to really pay attention on nailing every little move, but I was able to really figure out where all that time was going to be saved across the whole run to allow me to get under sub 4. In the end, these are just the lines that I've found that really help me not only feel the smoothest, but also the most consistent, which is really important when it comes to paddling a longboat at green range. But on top of that, these are just the lines that after putting in a lot of practice on almost every rapid, that I find I can be the smoothest and fastest, which in the end is all we're trying to do. Alright, so let's get into it. So getting right into it, literally off the race start is the first thing I really realized I was making a mistake in the past, and that is I used to paddle really hard off of the start to Frankenstein, because I was like, I'm going to save 2 seconds just to there. But then after watching people like Pat and DeGiel put in just really smooth, not very full-on racing stroke, and they were basically having the same time as me at that start, okay, clearly paddling really hard is wasting energy and unnecessary. And the reason for that, which you can apply to anywhere that you're in class 2 or flat waters, remember that a longboat is not like a short boat. It just takes a few strokes to get up to maximum velocity, and it's a lot easier to keep it up there with just some smooth stroke. You don't need to be at a full sprint to keep it up there. But in the end, conserve your energy, take a couple big strokes to get up to speed, but then just get into a nice rhythm, whether at the race start or any of the other flat water sections. Alright, first rapid, Frankenstein. Right here, a lot of people like to go over the rock on the right, but I like going left of it because, especially if it gets any lower, you're just staying in the faster current. But I also like that it really helped me carry my speed over that next rock. lot of people like to drive up on the rock on the right. Now, if you want to do that and you feel more consistent on that, definitely do it. But if you're trying to save as much time as possible, what I actually do is I actually bring my bow left and I basically try to avoid the rock on the right as much as possible, carrying my speed. What I usually do is take a big left sweep around it, and then by carrying my speed, I'm able to take a really, really big right boof stroke off of the triangle rock at Frankenstein. It allows me to carry a lot of speed out. Here's my 2020 lap on Frankenstein, which is pretty much as good as I ever try to do it in the race. Alright, moving on to all of our favorite rapid. I know it's your favorite, it's my favorite. No, I'm just playing. It's Johnson's Branch. We all know this is not our favorite rapid, but it is somewhere that you can lose a lot of time. For Johnson's Branch, the way I try to line it up is I'm looking for the highest point on that nice dome. Basically looking, it's kind of middle right and getting as much speed towards it as possible to carry as much speed over the rock as I can. But then, right as I'm about to get over the back side of the rock, I actually go ahead and drop my right edge to try to get off of that little kicker on the right and make sure I don't go off the back side. But then as I get on the sloping rock, I go ahead and get my left knee down almost as far as I can to try to match the angle of the rock. But then as I'm about to hit the deep water again, I get my left knee all the way back up so that way I can get the boat planing again and moving away, and it really helps stop you from potentially hitting that rock on the left. Then as you're carrying your speed away, I go ahead and get my right knee up again a little bit so that flow can take me left of that rock that's in the way, and then go ahead and settle the boat out and keep carrying my speed. All this little stuff, few good strokes as you're carrying your speed away makes a big difference. So for this little boof, I go ahead and just point as direct as I can downstream. Even though I'm cutting through the eddy a little bit, the more direct you are, helps save a little time. Alright, right here is Pincushion, which is the only place on the entire race course that I am fully committed to just doing a backstroke. The only place that I find it fully acceptable. The reason for that is I find when I try to come in direct, that little FU rock on the entrance usually kind of jangles me, or I get my paddle kind of in the way on that big rock on the right. So I just find for Pincushion, and I've timed it a bunch, it doesn't make a difference. If anything, it's faster and more consistent. I go ahead and swing my bow left into the slot slightly, put in a slight backstroke to swing my bow back right, but then I go ahead and get a nice big left stroke in to get my speed back up. Obviously here for Pincushion, try to get the best move possible and get off the middle left of this rock. Then right here I've timed both the left line and the line that I do a lot, and I just find that not only is the right line more consistent, but it can be a little bit faster. Basically aim over the rocks, just get as big of a left sweep stroke as you can, and just get your momentum moving back right. This boof, nothing crazy, but it can be kind of weird. What I do is I get as much speed as possible, I point my bow just slightly to the right, and I take a really big, almost like sweeping righty boof, and then get my left knee up as high as I can so that way I get the best boof possible and carry my speed. This boof, always weird. I always found it really frustrating because I felt like I was always getting chest full of water. But in the end, just keep your speed as best as possible into the flat water. And then for this flat water section, I go ahead and just try to keep my speed up, but not paddling too hard. Just keep a nice rhythm. For this boof, this one again can be kind of weird, but I found the best way to do this is still have a little bit of that right to left momentum, and the key is to wait a little bit longer than you think to get on that left boof, which will allow you the best chance to clear your stern without hitting that rock and get the best boof possible. And then here, even if I get a good boof, I go ahead and get on a really big left sweep to try to make sure that I'm carrying my momentum back to the right and into the good spot of whale tail. Right here, I know some people like going off the right side, but for me, I like threading the needle between the curler just to keep my speed up as much as possible. Alright, now we're at Boofers Consequence. Obviously, there are 3 lines to choose from. I have done all of them in the races. For a long time, I really like doing the far right, which a lot of people still like to do. But this is where I have one of the bigger eye-opening moments, because it's really easy to focus on the main move of Boofers Consequence, whether it's the left channel or the right channel. Realize that where the time is being saved is not actually in the rapid itself, but the exit boof and carrying your speed towards go left. So the difference between coming out of the right channel, going off that last little boop, or coming out of the left channel, carry your speed a lot more in that little bit of flat water before hot left. So that was one of those times I was like, okay, not only is the move really important, but the little bit of time saved in the outflow of Boofers Consequence into hot left, that's where time can be saved. So that's when I committed myself to learning the left line. So left line of Boofers Consequence, probably one of the most frustrating ones to do, but I finally found a way that I feel really good about it, that it is kind of something you have to commit to, but it works really well. When I realized I needed to learn the left line fast, I tried a bunch of different things. Like instead of just going up on the rock and drying out, I was like, there's got to be a way to carry speed. I tried doing things. At one point, I literally was putting my hand on the end of my paddle, trying to jam it into the rocks on the left, get the biggest push possible, but that got really hard to do. Then eventually at one point I was like, I'm just going to try something, and what I did worked really well, which is I just committed to as much speed as possible and took a huge left boof stroke up the rock and off, and that worked really well. So the key is to come in as close to this left rock as possible for as straight a line as possible and get some speed up. And then right here you want to get on that really nice smooth part right as you have that opening around the rocks on the left. Get the biggest left sweeping boof as possible. Keep it in the water as long as possible. This wasn't my fastest one I've done, even though it was a sub 4 run. 2020, I did it a lot better. But the key is just commit as long as possible for that huge left boof. And then as you land, get that right knee down, get a bow draw and do anything you need to do to get your bow back to the right and get a nice, strong, powerful stroke in to get you off of Boofers Consequence. If you do try this line, remember the key is full commitment. You cannot hesitate on that left boof or you'll probably get rejected and end up in the left eddy, which isn't fast. Once you come around the corner and you're going off actual Boofers Consequence, it is really important as you're going off to get the bow back left as much as you can. And the reason for this is that if you go too straight out of Boofers Consequence, you end up on those rocks on the right, and there's kind of an FU rock in the middle that you can lose a lot of speed on. So the only way to get the advantage of Boofers Consequence and carry your speed out of it towards hot left is to make sure you are as far left as possible and carrying your speed off of that last boof. I swung a little wide here in sub 4, but still was able to carry my speed. So as you notice, I am still doing hot left on the race runs. In 2019, I was doing go straight. Now, go straight does have one advantage, and that is when you nail it, you're going straight through the slot and coming out fast the other side. I'd always done hot left and done go left like we all do, but when Pat had that ridiculous line in 2017, I was like, oh wow. After I broke down the race runs, I realized that Pat in 2017 on that ridiculous run, he carried so much speed out of go left into that pool that the amount of time that he saved from exiting go left just getting to that next boof was a lot. And doing the traditional go left line where you kind of slide down the rock and then go through the slot was not saving enough time, even on the best one, in order to that be sub 4 time. So I committed to learning go straight. I did it in 2019, but I do not enjoy go straight. It is so hard to do well, and when it goes wrong, it goes really wrong. And in 2019, I did do it, but in 2020, I was like, I got to figure something else out because this is too unpredictable. And the hardest part about go straight is if it is higher water at all, the slot has so much more flow that piles on you that it doesn't end up being faster. And then on one lap in 2020, I was like, am I doing the slide down the rock on the right? Am I doing go straight? Neither are working that great. Like, what am I supposed to be doing? And then I finally walked up one more time, and I decided I'm going to try just boofing go left as if it's just a death hole. And in the end, that was a huge light bulb moment for me where I finally found a way that I can do go left, carry my speed through the slot and out into the pool as fast as I needed to save that time, but also way, way, way more predictable and consistent. So the way I do it, I come in to go left like we all do, carry your speed out of hot left, keep your bow up and left, slightly going off go left, but instead of moving left and looking for that rock and sliding down it, what I do now is I actually just carry my speed and take the biggest righty boof possible. And by doing that, what's happening is I'm getting the biggest boof out possible, and I'm carrying my speed over the hole and then through the slot, which is giving me the most consistent and best line that I can do. Because in the end, even if you nail go left, it's the speed you're carrying out that you save a lot of time. So I was so fired up when I figured this out, and I highly recommend doing this if you want the most consistent line possible at go left. Now the exit of go left, I used to always try to make it back left to go middle of the next rapid, and sometimes when you carry your speed out there, you can go there. I realized by committing to the right line after go left, regardless of where I came out, I could really just get some strokes in and just carry my speed all the way across the pool after go left. Alright, this is Swix, super fun sequence, but again, one of those places you can definitely lose the race. For the first drop of Swix, in the end, come in fairly far right and just take the biggest righty boof possible. When I land, I often like to go ahead and get one nice left stroke in to make sure that I'm carrying my speed all the way back to the right for the second drop of Swix. Now the second drop of Swix, you can run the far left. That is a line that I've done, a lot of people have done, but with the longboat, it's just so hard to get a good boof, and I find that if you do end up plugging or pitoning too hard, a lot of times you just get pushed in the left line of Swix. So I go ahead and try to go as far right as possible on the second drop and get as much of a left boof as possible and just get my bow up on those rocks. But this move is one spot that I always felt like I could lose the sub 4, and the reason for that is if you carry your speed too hard over the right side, there's that slow water on the right that can grab you, pull you all the way to the far right of the third slide, which is not fast. So just be ready for something to happen there. I like to go ahead and be ready with the right sweep to make sure that I'm staying down the middle of the third slide. For my sub 4 run, I did end up going too far right, but I was able to salvage it. In the end, the key to line up the slide properly is to look for that really nice dome, that pretty wet dome that kind of separates the slide from the left line of Swix. When you come down the slide, the key is to be ready with a really nice left boof, no matter where you are, to really carry your speed as direct as possible to Chiefs. So Chiefs, another spot that you can make up or lose a lot of time depending on how much you get pushed into that left eddy. And I find the best way to do Chiefs is to go ahead and get as close to the rock on the left side as possible to allow you the most direct line going through Chiefs. And then right here, what I'm thinking about doing is I want to make sure that I'm already kind of moving left off the drop before I take any strokes. But then, right as I'm about to go off, I take the biggest left boof possible, and I'm basically trying to get my nose behind the big rock in the middle. But I found really helps carry the most speed away from Chiefs and directly to gas pedal. After I take that really big left boof, keeping my bow behind the rock, I throw my weight as far forward as possible, and what happens is I find that allows me to get behind the rock. I miss the really big reconnect, and then because I'm leaning forward, I'm able to get that edge down and carry my speed as direct as possible towards gas pedal without getting pushed left. Since no matter what, you're always kind of carving the turn slightly, I like to go ahead and be ready on some right sweeps after Chiefs to make sure you're set back up on the left for gas pedal. Now, obviously, there are 3 different lines you can do here. You can do pencil sharpener, you can do gas pedal, or you can do flying squirrel on the left. In the end, when it comes to green rates, do what you're most comfortable with and what you think will be the safest for you and where you feel like you're going to be the smoothest. In the end, for sub 4, just going as fast as possible, the 2 options are really only gas pedal or pencil sharpener. Now, for a little while, I thought pencil sharpener would be the way to go, but after timing it, I realized not only is gas pedal just a lot more predictable, but when it comes to actually doing gas pedal, I found that it was a lot easier to get a nice boof off of it, and you actually carry your speed towards the notch a lot more than on pencil sharpener. So the key for gas pedal, look for that little wet rock on the right, kind of swing your bow around it, let your bow kind of go into the gas pedal slot. You're obviously trying to stay right of the fan rock that separates gas pedal and flying squirrel. Pull my bow into gas pedal with the right stroke, and then a really big left boof. Obviously, focus on what you're most comfortable on with the notch because you are right above gorilla. But the way I like to do the notch is the rock on the right that forms the notch. I am cutting almost as close as possible to that rock, and what I'll actually do is I would take a really, really big left boof stroke, sometimes even hitting the rock on the right slightly, but still fading my bow back left a little bit to make sure I'm not going to end up on Columbus or in the eddy on the right. And the reason for this is because the left side of the notch has that kind of hole and eddy, and I found that just dropping my bow left, I would often get slowed down a lot and often lose a lot of time, and it also makes you lose your speed before gorilla. So I found carrying my speed over the far right of the notch, lifting my bow as high as possible, taking the biggest boof possible, sometimes even hitting that rock a little bit, made sure that my bow was staying up, and I was able to consistently carry my speed to gorilla a lot more often. and it was actually saving half a second compared to a lot of other really good runs. So in the end, on my sub 4 run, I didn't actually have the perfect notch line that I wanted, and I actually thought this was one of the reasons I didn't get sub 4, simply because as I landed, I got swung a little bit right and lost a bit of speed. This is what I'm trying to do when I'm going for the notch. Alright, the classic Gorilla. By far one of the hardest things to nail, and the hardest part about Gorilla is when it comes to longboat, it is so hard to keep your bow up. In the end, Gorilla is always going to be hard to do, no matter any way you put it. And the biggest thing about Gorilla, which also applies to the slides, is that when the water is higher, even though there's more water blowing through the speed trap, it is so much harder to keep your bow up and over the speed trap. But there is a way that I figured out how to do Gorilla to essentially be somewhat consistent to keep my bow dry as long as I do the right thing coming off of Gorilla, but it does help when it's a little bit lower water. And for me, it's the only way I've ever been able to keep my bow over the speed trap on purpose. So for coming off the pad on Gorilla, I try to be middle, slightly middle left. And when I go off, I like to go off on a righty. But when I'm going off the pad, what I'll actually do is drop my bow just a little bit and actually point it slightly left. And the reason for that, if you are middle or middle right, there's all that flow moving right to left. But if you're on the left side of Gorilla, there's obviously all those little rocks that we obviously don't enjoy seeing people flip left towards. But what those rocks do on the left side of the slide, it actually creates a way to get your bow up and over the speed trap. I find that if you're anything middle to middle right, what happens is you land in the veil and that flow often wants to take you right to left. I find that's a way that can often end up with your bow pointing left and then you get stuck in the eddy by speed trap. I also don't like being that far right because you can take the biggest chest full at the speed trap, be kind of up against the wall. Doesn't mean that it can't work out. It doesn't mean that it's a bad line if you go middle, middle right. But for me, the line that I'm aiming for, that in practice I find is the best way for me to have the smoothest line and the best opportunity to keep my bow over speed trap, this is how I do it. And the way it works is those kind of rocks on the left, even though you're not always like hitting the rocks, the water that's coming off of it, I find by pointing your bow down and left, what happens is you go 1, 2, and then that last lift when your bow is coming back right gets you on top of the speed trap. So the most important thing for this is to be middle left and drop that bow slightly left. But the second most important thing is after you're taking that kind of second bounce, is right when you should start feeling that curler up going from right to left. Go ahead and get your right knee up and flatten the boat out. What happens is as you take that second bounce by flattening the boat out, that flow almost lifts you over the top of speed trap. And then if you do it right, your bow stay completely dry, you'll carry your speed, and you're just flying towards Green Machine. It was higher water for the sub 4 lap, which helped in a lot of places, but does make Gorilla on the slides harder. But I was still able to get my bow up and over speed trap despite the higher water. But a big reason that happened is because I lifted my right knee slightly, that curler lifted me up and over speed trap. So again, middle left, right boost stroke off the pad, drop the bow slightly left, take the 2 hits, 1, 2, on the second one, get that right knee up. The bow should lift up and over speed trap. Carry your speed. Alright, now we're in a Scream Machine. For Scream Machine, I'm usually looking for that kind of hump on the middle right. Then there's that little step down next to it. I usually try to aim basically right off the middle of that and go ahead and let my bow fall a little bit. Then for the hole at Scream Machine, I go ahead and try to aim basically right where the main hole ends and the curler's kind of coming in, or even just slightly right of that. I go ahead and take a left boof off of it. I didn't keep my bow up very much in the sub 4 lap, but in this moment, the key is to go ahead and get your right knee down and kind of almost pull in on a right bow draw. And the reason for that is you want that flow coming from left to right to go ahead and bring you back to the right slightly and miss the next hole. Normally right here I'd be on a right bow draw, but because I almost lost my bow to the left, I didn't take a stroke, but I'm usually pulling on some form of right bow draw to keep that speed moving. And then for nieces, this is one of those boofs that really made me realize that you cannot get lazy. So the key for nieces here, I find that if when you're already pretty far right, it's a lot easier to avoid a lot more of the curler, meaning that you're able to get far right with a little more speed, but also less likely to take as much of the curler, and you're not having to swing your bow back left as much, which can be sometimes hard to do. So what I actually try to do is I go ahead and try to boof almost over top of the eddy on the right of nieces. And this left boof, even if you have zero energy left, you have to put everything you have into this big left boof. Because the second you get lazy at this move, your bow can stay right and spin out, which I've done. You can get pushed back left and plug nieces, or you just don't get far enough right to carry your speed away from it nicely. Take the biggest boof you've ever taken in your life to get your bow up and over the curler. For the last hole of nieces, it is better to be a little farther right and not take a boof than it is to potentially turn back too early and still try to take a big boof stroke, because if you're not far enough right, your bow will not come up at nieces. Then right here, as I'm coming out from nieces, there's that kind of slow boily water. I like to go ahead and get my right knee up and kind of carve slightly left to make sure I have the best chance possible to be set up for power slide. Okay, power slide. This for me was the sub 4 killer. This was the one rapid that no matter how much I was trying to work on it, it was the one rapid that, especially in the race when you're so tired, I could not figure out how to do it. But then finally a few years ago, I spent most of my day on the water lapping power slide, because I would always try to go really far right, but then there's that weird piton that can push you back to the middle. I would try just going down the middle, down the pipe, which sometimes does work out pretty well, but a lot of times you end up getting put into the right bank or the left eddy, or you just stop completely because you're taking a huge chestful. But then finally I figured out a way to have the best line possible. And even though I didn't have the most perfect line on the sub 4 lap, I still was able to get pretty much where I wanted to be and still carried my speed pretty good. I'm going to use a few of the practice laps to show what I was really trying to do at power slide, but here's the lineup. In order to do power slide right, it is really helpful to be all the way left, moving back right. So it's really important that you hit nieces for this line to work. For the lineup, come in a little more middle left than you would think for how far right you're trying to get. And then right here, instead of being a little farther right, potentially taking that little piton or getting a little more dried out and potentially push back to the middle, what I actually do is right where that spray on the right is landing, I try to take the biggest left sweeping boof, whatever it is, to get my momentum as far right as possible. But I also go ahead and lift my left knee up slightly. But right here, this is the most important part. Instead of just going ahead and turning back immediately, right at this moment, take the biggest right stroke possible, like as large as you can get any contact with, and throw your weight forward. When you throw your weight forward, you can actually carry your speed a lot farther right, and there are some nice rocks almost all the way on the right side of the slide that will help you lift your bow and get your bow up nice and high to carry your speed. Your bow can stay completely dry if you do it right. I ended up turning back a little earlier than I meant to on the sub 4 lap, but luckily I was still able to carry my speed out pretty nicely. So here's a practice lap to show what I'm always trying to do in the runs. So in the end, in order to do power slide right, it's really important that you're hitting nieces well, because you need to be on the far left, moving back right for power slide because you need that momentum. Get that huge left boof in, biggest right stroke possible while getting your weight forward. Wait a bit longer than you think to get that bow back left. And if you do all these things right, you should be a lot farther right on the slide. And if you do it right, you can keep your bow completely dry, which is the most satisfying thing at power slide. And then, finally, you're at the last slide of the day, but everybody knows rapid transit can always do something weird. The way I line up rapid transit, there's kind of that nice hump on the right side. I am basically middle right, pointing ever so slightly left. What's most important right here for rapid transit is you want to be slightly more right than you think. And the reason for that is if you fall off too far left, we all know there's a lot more fan rocks and weird rocks that can make you lose all your speed while going down rapid transit. It's really weird, but also it doesn't give you the skip you need out from rapid transit to the finish line. So the key is to end up about a foot or two off the right wall with a bit of left angle. Then the final thing that I'm focusing on in rapid transit is I go ahead and get my left knee up ever so slightly. And the reason for that is you usually often get a little bit of a hit from that rock on the far right. Often will bump your boat a little, and I find by having the right knee down slightly, what happens is it just hits my boat and I'm able to keep it straight towards the finish. I got deflected a little more on the sub 4 lap than I wanted, but I was still able to keep it straight. Then when you carry your speed out, just get right out to the finish, get those last strokes in. It's not over until you go through the bars. So if you made it to here, you watched this whole breakdown, thanks for sticking around for the whole thing. I hope this was useful information for a lot of you. The biggest thing I find is just find the lines that feel the most consistent. You want them to be fast, but you also need them to be consistent because when you're racing, you're a lot more tired and it's a lot harder to hit those one and done lines. So finding those consistent lines for you is going to be more useful than anything else. So in the end, there's a few things that I really try to focus on when it comes to training for green race and just the race in general. Number one, don't get lazy. With a longboat is not forgiving when it comes for you not putting in all the effort necessary to nail the line. From the first move to the last, you have to put everything you have into each move. For me, telling myself don't get lazy is always the biggest thing I always focus on when going into green race. Number two, if there are any moves you are struggling with, just do laps on that move. Yes, doing top to bottom is important. But if you're always doing top to bottoms, you're always going to be tired by the time you get to the bottom of the run. And when you're tired, you can't figure out how to do those moves and you often are struggling. It's really important while you're full of energy to do things like the slides at the bottom of the run. Because when you're full of energy, you can be like, oh, if I put in this huge boof stroke, I know that I can nail this line. And so the key is while you're full of energy, dial in each of those moves so you know exactly what you're working towards and what you're aiming for. Because when it comes to the race run, even if you are full of energy, the nerves are going to make you feel tired. But if you practice that move full of energy, you know what you're trying to do. So it's a lot easier to tell yourself, put in all this effort when you know exactly what you're aiming for. And I find if you only do things like top to bottom, it's really hard to truly dial in the line on things like the slide because you're always going to be tired and you never truly know what you're doing wrong. So things like power slide, nieces, gorilla, just do laps on those. Dial in those moves, and then when you feel like you know what you're aiming for and the line you're trying to hit, then go back to the top to bottoms. Then lastly, one of the important things to remember when it comes to paddling a longboat on the green is plan a couple moves ahead. When it comes to a normal creek boat, you can get to where you're trying to go and probably still hit the line. With a longboat, even if you get to where you're trying to go, if you're not coming from the right spot from the move before, it's going to be a lot harder to nail that line. A good example is it's important to be on the far right of nieces to allow you to have the straightest line possible onto the right side of the slide, and then you can bring your bow back left. But if you're coming from way left to right on nieces and your bow's pointing far right, even if you get to where you're trying to go, you're probably not going to be able to get your bow back left and you'll likely spin out. Even if it's the smallest rapid, focus on how that rapid sets you up for the next one and each of those moves in a sequence rather than focusing on just where you're trying to end up. So that's my breakdown of the green. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope I gave you guys some new information. If a lot of this is information you already knew about, thanks for watching anyways. And in the end, just because I've gotten the sub 4, I know that we're going to keep finding faster ways to do the lines. We're going to keep improving. I'm still going to keep trying to work on each rapid to get faster and faster. But in the end, up until this point, these are the ways that I have found the most consistent way to hit the line. Because in the end, we all know longboat is hard, but especially you only get one run a year. So consistency is everything. So for me, after putting in a lot of time, timing every single rapid on a bunch of different runs, races, practice, whatever it may be, as well as just being out there and lapping each of those rapids as much as possible, these were just the techniques and lines that I felt allowed me to have the best lines possible. And I hope some of this helps you guys have your fastest time at the green race this year. So thanks for watching the breakdown video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I gave you guys some information that will help you get your fastest time at green race this year. Stay safe out there, and I'll catch you guys on the water. I'm gonna have to make a post-credit scene in this one. The best lines
Already?
I only have 54 minutes of card.
Leave. Action.
I get nervous around pretty girls.
Is this basically an instructional video on how to beat you?
Yes. Maybe I shouldn't make this video.